Hey guys, Drifter here. I've got no gameplay for you today and very little in the way of fancy graphics either. Instead, I just want to have a little fireside chat with you all about the Epstein files. Where are the Epstein files? Do those files include the client list? Did the client list ever exist to begin with? Does that list still exist now, or was it destroyed? Or were the files altered by politicians? Why is it that every single person in the current administration has a different thing to say about the files existing or not existing? All of the lies and flip-flopping about releasing the files have made me genuinely sick to my stomach and pissed off, which is why I'm doing this video instead of something positive about gaming. Because I would like to know who Epstein's clients were. What rich and influential people flew to that island to diddle those kittles? Inquiring minds would like to know. I would prefer to see all of the people there on the client list punished quite severely as well. And you know what? I don't think that I'm alone in this feeling. I don't think that's just a Drifter situation. This is the only issue that I've seen in a decade that's actually uniting both Republicans and Democrats. Every single person that I talk to, no matter how big of a Trump supporter they are pissed off about this and want the client list released. Other people in my social circle that are so far left of center, they self-identify as actual anarcho-communists, also want the Epstein client list released. I personally don't care what party is overrepresented in the client list or what business owners or celebrities are on it for that matter. My personal bias is left of center, but if the list turns out to be like 85% Democrats, that's tough luck for them. I don't want to associate with them or have my beliefs associated with people that seem to think that child sex trafficking is okay. If the list is mostly Republicans, then they should be arrested too. I don't care who it is that engaged in that kind of behavior. There has to be some kind of accountability. If it's revealed that somebody I think highly of, like Keanu Reeves, flew down there to the island, as hurtful as it would be, he would have to go to jail if that were true. And as a side note, this isn't a Keanu accusation. It's just that I wanted to make an example of somebody that is broadly respected, and to make the point that no matter who you are, if you engage in these behaviors, you should be punished. It doesn't matter how much community goodwill you have. I believe that those who prey on children should be severely punished because the crime is heinous and it preys on the most vulnerable in our society. And I believe the punishment should be even more extreme if it turns out that it is the richest and most influential people on the planet doing this. I think this is a big deal, and I don't think it's going to blow over anytime soon. The reason why it's such a big deal is twofold. Number one, it's the first thing I've seen in a decade that actually unites Democrats and Republicans in single purpose. And it's also fermenting a MAGA rebellion, even as Trump's most loyal base of supporters are at odds with him over his decisions on this one. There doesn't seem to be anywhere to hide from the Epstein files, but my God, I would love to know where they hid that missing 1 minute from the supposedly raw footage that was released that was doctored. We're going to get to that later. You can see I'm almost off my rocker today. There's a lot of details to this revolting story that I'm going to try to lay out here today. And this video isn't going to be unbiased, as I will be offering my opinions as well, but I'm going to try to keep those biases and opinions separate from the facts so that you can all follow along regardless of what you might personally believe. And I'm not going to spend too much time focusing on what Epstein did to become public enemy number one. I assume that all of you know about the honeypot trap to lure billionaires to this private island so that they can engage in illicit activities with trafficked minors. Epstein wasn't doing this for cash. Instead, he seemed to be recording and collecting proof of their visits and then using that for later blackmail or influence. This fact has been established so well that I wouldn't be surprised if uncontacted tribes in the Amazon know who Jeffrey Epstein is. And what I want to focus on today are the files and the client list. Let's start with what the files are likely to contain and what they likely don't contain. One of the things they might contain is more flight logs or a detailed guest list of specifically who went to the island. We have some flight logs thanks to leaks and court cases, so we have already a partial guest list. We know that Epstein targeted and tried to honeypot loads of influential people, but only some of them said yes to the island trips. These additional files and details would likely allow us to sort out which of our politicians made a friendly connection and then noped out when it got weird, and which ones went on the whole island adventure. It's extremely important to be able to distinguish between which celebrities Epstein targeted and which celebrities he successfully convinced to assault minors. The president harped on this point and said that he wouldn't release the files because innocent people would get blamed, but the whole point of the files is to separate the innocent people from the guilty. Yes, the room temperature IQ crowd probably would be mad at everybody and everything on the list, and there would be an army of dum-dums creating problems, but those in power, law enforcement agencies, our representatives, they all have the intelligence to sort out the targets from the clients and then to do something about the clients instead of just letting them go free. There were rumors for a long time that Epstein recorded all of the actions on the island. There was some evidence that he did this for his parties in the 80s, and I even saw claims that there were whole shelves of VHS tapes and CDs containing various famous people's crimes. I'm actually pretty skeptical of that existing, and if it did, those can never be released to the public because it would be a criminal act to do so. It's a whole different legal can of worms to release tapes of minors getting assaulted. But hey, if we're going to edit a couple of minutes out of the Epstein suicide clip that's supposed to be raw footage, why don't we just do some black bar censorship and edit around the bad parts of the client videos? I mean, why not if we're editing the suicide video? Another thing that these files might contain is a list of individuals that were complicit in helping cover up the trafficking of minors over decades. Epstein wasn't alone, and it's not like his only assistant was Ghislaine Maxwell. He had help from government officials around the world, from both high and low places, all the way from national down to state level to security guards. There were a lot of people that had their hands in the Epstein pie, which is probably why there's such a concerted effort to bury all of the evidence. For example, what was Prince Andrew doing spending so much time with Epstein? Inquiring minds would like to know, but the Crown would like to shut that down and capitulate to any favor or trade necessary to keep it out of the public eye. Why was Epstein close to the Clinton family? Why was Epstein such good friends with President Trump in the 80s? Inquiring minds would like to know about these things as well, but both of our parties would rather you forget about them. Since we're now literally talking about conspiracies and cover-ups, I thought about using my tinfoil hat today, but unfortunately these are conspiracies that are coming true. I wanted to redirect to some of the interesting connections that Epstein had to people in power that helped cover up his crimes for decades, and some interesting Epstein fun facts. So let's start off with a little history and who helped the cover-up. At 21 years of age, young Jeffrey Epstein got a job working as a mathematics teacher at the Dalton School in Manhattan. His direct supervisor was a man named Donald Barr, who is the father of William Barr, who would go on to become Donald Trump's attorney general. And this story gets absolutely disgusting because there were credible reports at the school at the time that Jeffrey Epstein had disciplinary issues for behaving inappropriately around young female students. A double layer of disgusting is that you might not know that Donald Barr was a novelist. In 1973, he wrote a sci-fi book called Space Relations, which has been described as highly unsettling due to its depiction of rape of enslaved people, particularly teenage girls, and heinous sex acts against minors. The book is a lot worse than you might think, and also seems to foreshadow Epstein's upcoming career. It's interesting that he worked under this person. Epstein then later worked for Bear Stearns in the 80s, but was fired for securities fraud. During this time, he was also accused of being a spy for the Israeli intelligence agency Mossad. Epstein would actually frequently tell people this as a braggadocious act, and there were even leaks coming out of the White House stating that Alexander Costa, who we'll talk about here in a little bit, told White House staff that Epstein was foreign intelligence and to leave it alone. During the 80s, Epstein was very active in social circles in New York City. He partied with many of New York's elite, including our current president, Donald Trump. There's plenty of now infamous pictures of them together, but there's also pictures of Epstein with tons and tons of other billionaires and politicians and stuff. In 1987 to 93, he worked at a place called Towers Financial Corporation that lost about $500 million in a Ponzi scheme. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $1 billion today. And it was shortly after this failed Ponzi scheme that the infamous honeypot scheme began. That's a lot of baggage for one person to carry. That's a lot of history there. But moving along through these connections, we would ask, who's in power now? Because that's who would be in charge of covering this up. Well, in 2007 to 2008, Alexander Costa served as the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, and he was the one that approved the deal of a lifetime, or sweetheart get-out-of-jail-free plea agreement for Epstein. Like, Epstein had been caught running this island scheme almost a decade ago, but Alexander Costa in the state of Florida only got him to plead guilty to one single charge of solicitation in exchange for non-prosecution for any of the other crimes, like a literal slap on the wrist. Why is that weird? Alexander Costa would later serve as the U.S. Secretary of Labor under Donald Trump's first administration. So, when Epstein got caught reoffending in 2019, seemingly with an even bigger honeypot scheme, his old friend Donald Trump was president. And the guy that cut him a sweetheart deal in Florida was on the president's cabinet. Oh, and the son of his former employee who wrote horrible books about assaulting underage women is now the attorney general. All of the people in power that could do anything about this were Epstein's friends. So the attorney general already knew Epstein through his father. The president knew him through the parties. And if you flight logs too, if you want to look those up, Trump is on the flight logs. And so did the Secretary of Labor. There's probably a ton more that I'm forgetting, but these are the big ones. So in 2019, when Donald Trump was president, Jeffrey Epstein becomes public enemy number one and is the subject of intense focus by the media, voters, a whole ton of people. The decision is made to remove Epstein from suicide watch and place him in a facility with a known malfunctioning camera. I want to clarify that. They knew the camera was malfunctioning when they put him in the room. He then commits suicide while both guards aren't paying attention and the camera isn't working. You would think that this would be a Trump hate video from the way I'm talking so far, but at this point, I have to swap over to talking trash about the Biden administration too, because in 2020, they took over this disaster of an investigation and then decided that they wanted to be hands off about it. From my limited readings, apparently the Biden administration didn't want to give the appearance of engaging in lawfare or interfering with the DOJ. So the Biden administration seems to have done nothing, or perhaps almost nothing, with the Epstein client list. Maybe there were prominent Democrats on there too that they wanted to keep buried. Maybe there were favors to trade. I don't know exactly, because nobody's seen the full client list, which circles back around today, or for Trump and the Republican Party. They seem hell-bent on burying the Epstein story. Pam Bondi, our Attorney General, has insisted that the client list was on her desk for weeks, and then also insisted that a client list never existed. The president claimed that the list would incriminate too many innocent people, then that the list did not exist, and then that the list did exist but had been doctored by Obama, which, by the way, is an absolutely pathetic lie. Of all of the politicians associated with Epstein, you should have picked Clinton over Obama. Obama didn't seem to have anything to do with Epstein, whereas Clinton very much so did. The deputy director of the FBI, who once claimed that there was an Epstein list, is now apparently in such disarray about the handling of this case that he's trying to retire. And again, this is a Trump loyalist we're talking about here. As a matter of fact, there's a number of career lawyers and investigators that are retiring on this over this. And the only truth of the situation is that it's very obvious that we're being lied to, and lied to badly. These aren't even good lies or clever lies or misdirections. These are brain dead, room temperature IQ, stupid lies, like a child with their hand caught in the cookie jar. It actually reminds me of the narcissist prayer, which is a phrase given to describe a pattern of toxic behaviors by narcissistic individuals that seek to avoid blame. It goes something like this: that didn't happen. If it did happen, it wasn't that bad. And if it was that bad, it's not a big deal. And if it was a big deal, it's not my fault. And if it was my fault, I didn't mean it. And if I did mean it, then you deserved it. I'm actually, so much of this, it goes on forever. But you can see the same type of logic. If we were to apply this type of logic to Epstein, it would be something like, there are no files. The files do exist, but they're not a big deal. It's not my fault I can't release the files because they'll hurt people. The files were doctored by Obama. Can we please stop talking about the files? Is where this eventually goes. And I don't think we can, please. I don't think this is going to blow over, because it's one of the core tenets of the new MAGA movement. We're going to circle back to that, but I also want to talk about the missing footage that brings us up to date on the most recent thing. As of me recording this video, I'm disabled. My production times are slow. By the time this gets out, there will probably be additional Epstein nonsense that I have to cover in some sort of cutaway here. But for today, it's the missing footage. The White House was supposedly going to release a raw and unedited version of the file of the camera closest to Epstein before his apparent suicide. Of note, the camera that was inside the cell had failed, so this was the camera of the hallway leading to and from the cell. As best my understanding, I could be incorrect about this. There's a wash of misinformation out there. Well, that camera is missing 1 minute of footage conveniently around the time that Epstein killed himself. They didn't even bother trimming out the time code at the bottom. It just skips a few minutes. A forensics expert got their hand on the footage and then discovered that the metadata in the footage indicates it was edited in Adobe Premiere, stitched together from 3 different files, and finally appears to have just under 3 minutes of total footage edited out in various sections. So the raw White House footage was literally doctored, and whoever did that was so stupid that they didn't even correct the time code or even know what metadata is for photos and videos. Oh, and let's add a cherry on top. Today in the House of Representatives, Democrats proposed an amendment today that would force Congress to vote on to whether or not to compel the Department of Justice to release the Epstein files. This seems to have been done as in a deliberate attempt to troll Republicans because their platform is built around Epstein-like conspiracies. Democrats thought they were going to get an easy win on this one, but would you be surprised to hear that the Republican Party voted unanimously to shut down this amendment and keep the Epstein files secret? Mighty suspicious, you know. And this whole situation is cursed because it appears that every single person in power is bending over backwards to protect a man who is more evil than Homelander. But I don't think this situation is just going to blow over, because this is actually one of the core tenets of the MAGA movement. We're finally at that part of the video. The Epstein files is almost, they're treated almost religiously in that movement, because the MAGA movement isn't really any different than other populist movements. It may have different messages or, you know, new stuff going on, but its structure and the behavior of its adherents is pretty much textbook populism. The strength of these beliefs will vary from person to person, but the group as a whole has a very strong belief about punishing pedophiles of all kinds, especially those in positions of power. You can go all the way back to Pizzagate, QAnon, gender education in schools, gay books in libraries, trans athletes, and tons more stuff that is all designed to reaffirm a belief that this movement is about protecting children. Saying that your movement is about protecting children from getting trafficked and assaulted is actually a brilliant psychological choice, because that's a statement that is extremely easy to defend. On top of that, if people criticize this movement or that belief, then it's easy to dismiss them as pedo supporters. I could do probably like a 50-minute video on how these type of beliefs are toxic and break them down philosophically or whatever, but I do just want to say it was brilliant political branding to focus on these issues, because it's so easy for people to latch onto and defend. On top of that, right-wing politicians from moderate to MAGA have been harping on the Epstein case for years. They criticized the Biden administration into oblivion for not releasing the files, and rightfully so. Criticism from people I don't agree with can still be valid criticism. There were endless social media posts about Jeffrey Epstein, podcasts, press conferences, campaign events, and campaign promises that focused on revealing the complete Epstein client list and finally punishing these billionaires. Then finally, a not insignificant number of these posts seemed to blame Democrats or liberals in general. They were going to expose all these Democrat pedos in Congress, and didn't seem to notice that the Democratic voter base was also on board for this as well, apparently less so for the elected representatives themselves. So now finally the Republican Party has control of everything: the White House, the Supreme Court, the Senate, the House of Representatives, the majority of governorships, the majority of judgeships, and the majority of local government offices. They're running the show here. They've got nearly unilateral power to do whatever in the flip they want, and their constituents have asked for exactly one thing: show the Epstein client list that you promised to show more than 500 times on the campaign trail. And the only answer they got is, there is no client list. Let's not talk about this. What? That type of incongruency isn't going anywhere anytime soon. That's a big enough slap in the face to make even the most loyal voters sick to their stomach. They were playing identity politics and decided making punishing Epstein's clients a core tenet of that identity. Now that the party is trying to reverse course and just make Epstein non-canon, I suppose, it's not working. I mean, the strategy worked hundreds of times before for the Trump administration because it was on smaller, lesser important issues, and it's worked throughout dozens of populist movements throughout history, so I assume they would work it again, but not this time. Because this time it's like that quote from 1984 where in one sentence we shipped over from war with Europe to Eurasia or whatever. And this time they're asking people to forget this particular incident, and it's so backwards and contrary to the zeitgeist of the entire movement that even the most zealous supporters are getting weary. And that's not to say anything of the Democrats, who seem more than anything else to view this as an opportunity to capitalize on some kind of political game that, you know, oh, they beat us over the head with the Epstein client list for years. Let's do some half-hearted measures and push a little bit to just kind of make them look bad. But we're not really going to uncover that Epstein client list. Nah. But you know what? I would wager about 98% of all people watching this video would agree that something is very wrong here. I don't fully know who's at fault. I don't know who's on the client list. I don't know what the consequences would be of releasing it. But I do know that a huge number of people are working very hard to hide this client list from the public eye. And the whole point of me making this video is just to add one to the pile in hopes of putting pressure on this administration to do something about the Epstein list. Look, guys, I am so far left of center that cuckolding enthusiasts look down on me, but I still try to live in reality, which right now is the Trump administration, where they have the power to do just about anything. So why can't we do this actually one useful, good, beneficial thing? Why is this the one thing that somehow cannot be done no matter what? We can upend centuries of previous precedents and just do things whatever and skip courts, and that's very popular and people love it. Oh, dude, Epstein, no, we can't. Oh, we're rule followers now, boys. Like, ugh, I hate it so much. I hate it to the end of time. It makes me sick. It pisses me off. I think I managed to make this whole video without cursing, so my monetization status won't be terrible. This is just my opinion on the thing. This is how I feel about it. This is Drifter getting butthurt and just ranting to vent his own emotions. I hope that you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.